Hi, my name is Steve Murphy, and this is the Insider Exclusive. Welcome to our show. Today, we're going to be taking an inside look at one of America's and Southern California's premier law firms, Girardi and Keese. Stay tuned.
Some lawyers get so entranced with the idea that there's a potential $10 billion verdict that when a mere several $100 million is offered, they turn it down.
If you live in an area that's infested with chromium or benzene or those sorts of things, you don't even know it's there. Those are the toxic torts. Namely, those are victims of the manner in which somebody else disposes of stuff that really hurts people.
The individual that, looked at all these documents and then said this drug is safe to give to 20 million Americans, they bear some responsibility, and it would take a special individual indeed to come forward and say, perhaps I dropped the ball.
There's a lot of talk about personal responsibility, but so few companies are willing to step up to the plate when it happens.
I want to thank you, to be able to tell this story so that people understand a little bit what the trial lawyers do is really important.
In our continuing series about America's premier law firms, we have with us again Girardi and Keese. Welcome to the show, Tom.
Hey, nice to see you, Steve.
You get involved a lot with toxic tort cases as well as pharmaceutical drug litigation, which we're going to have some of your partners talking about that later. Define for our audience what toxic torts are. Give us some examples.
Well, generally, if you're in an automobile accident and break your leg, you've been in an accident, your leg hurts. If you live in an area that's infested with chromium or benzene or those sorts of things, you don't even know it's there.
Yes.
It doesn't smell different. It doesn't taste different. And the next thing you know, you see clusters of people getting cancer or clusters of people getting some other serious disease, thyroid cancer, those sorts of things. And those are the toxic torts. Namely, those are victims of the manner in which somebody else disposes of stuff that really hurts people.
Yes. They've been injured, and that's when you step in.
Sure.
A lot of people approach you with cases where they may have been injured. How does your firm decide which ones to take?
Well, you have to spend a lot of time and a lot of money making sure the case is meritorious.
Yes.
These cases take an awful lot of money with experts and everything else to prove and to win.
Give me an example. You had the Aaron Brockovich case.
Sure, Aaron Brockovich, we had $10 million of our own money in that case.
You had spent $10 million before the verdict came in.
Right, not with lawyer time, but
Yes.
just writing checks
This
to
is
experts. Right, exactly.
You weren't being paid at that time.
No, of course not.
And I want to emphasize for our audience that you're a plaintiff's firm. You take cases on contingency.
Sure.
If you believe in the merit of the case, you'll take it on, you'll spend your money.
Yes, exactly.
Let me ask you a question. You've been
right.
known as the billion-dollar gentleman, okay?
That's a nice thing to say.
Billion-dollar gentleman. I was reading this not too long ago. When the other side sees that you represent them, what do they think?
Well, I think they think that, first of all, we're going to treat them with total civility in our law firm.
Yes.
Our law firm specializes in none of this nonsense of yelling and screaming and those motions, etc. We try to cooperate. So I think that's one thing they do.
We will not see Al Pacino at your law firm yelling and screaming.
No, Al didn't make the cut. And then I think they'll also know that we'll be well prepared.
Yes.
We'll spend the money to get the right experts to be able to
Right.
tell the story so the people have their best possible shot of success.
Before we bring in your other partners, you brought up a point about treating people civilly. I understand that you're a graduate of Loyola
I am.
Law School.
I am.
And I understand that you have a building named in your honor over there, is that
Yeah,
correct?
we raised some money and built that building.
Yeah, but I understand that you teach a course over there. It has to do with trial ethics, is that correct?
Yes, that's true.
Tell us a little bit about that.
I've been able to garner some of the finest trial lawyers from across the country that are in organizations that I'm in, the International Academy of Trial Lawyers,
Yes.
the Inner Circle, and we bring them in, and they talk about ethical things that they're confronted with in trial or in the trial practice. we had the Chief Justice come,
Yes.
Chief Justice Ron George. And it's a small class. We limit it to 24 of the students. And I get more out of it, obviously, than the students do.
But
by the end of the
there's a
semester.
purpose behind the thing, isn't there?
Sure, there's a purpose. There's a purpose. There are two things you need to be a lawyer. One, you got to understand the law. Number two, you have to know how to present it.
Let me ask you this question because you're a plaintiff's lawyer. You know as well as I know. We'll talk about the Ford rollover cases. The automobile companies, and I don't mind saying this, I can be sued, not you, right? The automobile companies hide things sometimes. You know, remember Dick Nixon in his case where there was a crime committed, but the cover-up is always worse, and that's what they pay for, right?
Sure.
My question to you is, how do you think the corporate lawyers feel when they know there's documentation that exists that you have to get some which way or whatever? How do you think, how do you define that as ethical?
Let me tell you this. There are some companies out there that give you those documents.
Yes.
Honest to God. We make the motion, in come the documents.
Just out of nowhere.
Right, because they produce them. No, they produce them, and
Yes.
they know it's bad, but nonetheless for them.
Okay.
But they produce them.
Yes. But there are some that are famous.
That's more the exception.
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
more
yeah.
the exception.
There are some
okay.
that are famous for hiding them, preventing you from getting them, and then when you do get them, they will show up with a dump truck, you know, with 10 billion documents, right, and
no.
dump them all on you, right?
Right, and because they don't think you're going to read them.
Yes.
And we read them.
So when getting back to Loyola and your course on ethics, is that the message you're trying to send to the new lawyers? You know, do this in an ethical manner.
No question about it.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely no question about it. And quite honestly, there's a lot of personal success in being ethical.
Yes.
You know, all of a sudden, if the other side knows you're going to do the right thing all the time, they give you a lot of credit for that.
Do they?
You settle cases for a lot more money.
Really?
No question about it.
Good, good. Well, we are going to bring some of your other partners on here, so
Sure.
we're going to bring them right now. Well, Tom, you brought one of your other partners, Howard Miller, in here, and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Steve. Always a pleasure to be here.
Both of you handle toxic tort cases. You handle appellate court cases. Tell us a little bit about the toxic tort cases and the environmental cases that, you know, your firm is handling.
You know, we have them all over the country. Every one of these cases starts with a company disposing of stuff that
Yes.
hurts people without protecting the people that it's going to hurt.
Yes.
You know, it's very expensive to properly dispose of chromium, benzene, all of these chemicals that can cause so much damage to people.
It costs them more later on, though, right?
Well,
They're caught.
we hope so.
That's the plan, if they're caught, right? Let me bring out, there's a case that you're involved with, I think, the Greenpoint case, right?
Right.
And you're involved with, is Erin Brockovich involved in that case, too?
You know, she was.
Okay.
Matter of fact, some of the people in Greenpoint went to Erin.
Oh, okay.
And that's how we got involved in the case initially.
And I understand over a period of something like 20 or 30 years or something like that, oil has spilled out, is that correct?
Oh.
Something like 30 million gallons?
Millions of gallons of oil.
And Mobil was aware of it before. When they merged with Exxon, they've been aware of it, and this case is going on. Which brings up another point. Let's talk about the Valdez spill, okay? How long ago was that, 20 years?
Yeah.
I understand that Exxon was given a judgment that they had to pay $5 billion. Now that's been back and forth between the Supreme Court. It was knocked down to $4 billion, $4.5, whatever. I understand that Exxon has only paid $100 million of that $5 billion.
Right.
This is 20 years later.
It shows you that large corporations can have the staying power. These people who were harmed 20, 25 years ago
Yes.
are yet to see a nickel.
It's now going back up an appeal again on the ground that legally they can't be have punitive damages assessed against them.
Wasn't that an issue before? No.
The amount was an issue before. Now it's been reassessed, and it's going back up again on the general issue of whether at all there can be punitive damages against them. They're fighting payment of any dollar
Yeah.
that they can fight.
Now this is an aberration. This is an exception. Most companies end up paying. PG&E paid $36 million.
Right, the first time, and then in
And the
another.
second time, which was just recent, wasn't it?
Right.
And
they-
why was there a second part of this, which was another $300 or $400 million?
Right, and that was a different site.
Oh.
The plant was located in a different place, but indeed, they did exactly the same stuff
So
there.
my question, PG&E is a big company. Exxon's a big company. Why don't they follow the same MO as Exxon and not try not to pay any money at all?
Because
Why's that?
Girardi and Keese was not in the Exxon Valdez case.
That's a good point. That's a very good point.
These companies can stretch it out.
Yeah.
But now, as a law firm, you have to have the ability to understand the case.
Yes.
You have to have enough money to hire the good experts.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have enough trial ability to try the case, and then you need the appellate lawyers that can stave off.
That's where Howard comes in.
That's my smart guy. Yeah.
Well, and you need one other thing that Tom has more than any other lawyer in the world,
Yeah.
which is the ability to know when to settle and when to fight.
Yeah.
You know, some lawyers get so entranced with the idea that there's a potential $10 billion verdict that when a mere several $100 million is offered, they turn it down.
Yeah.
It's Tom's ability to know when to settle the case and
What's
what
realistic,
amount.
right?
Sure.
And the timing. When is
Yeah.
the right time? This ability to know when is the right time to get the maximum amount. That's a key skill here that very few lawyers have.
There's a lot of lawyers that are going to be watching this show. So I'm going to ask this question on behalf of them. What makes a great trial lawyer?
I think on the plaintiff side, somebody who really cares. Huh? You know what I mean?
You got
I
to know
don't
your
think
subject. You got to know your subject.
You can't fake.
But how
things.
you address the jury? You address them like a real person, right?
Of course. Well, jurors now, Steve, are every bit as smart as you are.
Yes.
Man. You know,
Because they watch Law and Order, don't they?
they watch Law and Order. They got all that down. So
Yeah.
when you try these cases, if there's some questionable evidence, some bad evidence against you
Yes.
in the case, you have to talk about this to the jury. You can't pretend it isn't there.
Bring it out before the other side brings it out.
You want to bring it out in the way in which probably is a little more favorable to you.
You have a huge advantage with so many years' experience, tried so many cases. When you're up against a law firm that has corporate lawyers, a lot of them haven't seen a lot of trial experience.
Not
have they?
the number of senior litigators
Yes.
in large firms that have never had a jury trial
Yeah.
is just amazing.
Here's
Now
a question.
you have a firm like Skadden.
Yeah.
They have some real trial dudes
Yeah.
over there, man. They can try the case, but they're an exception. Most of the large firms really haven't tried that many cases.
I hear this word misused a lot, litigator and trial attorney.
Oh.
Yeah, I see that
The
reaction.
worst thing. The
Yeah.
worst thing you could call me.
You are
Never
a trial
call me a
attorney,
litigator.
right?
Gosh darn it. yeah.
Litigator is a guy that works outside the courtroom, right?
Right. And filing a bunch of unnecessary motions.
Why do
and-
they call them litigators?
I don't know.
Because they're not trial lawyers.
Oh, okay, good. That's a good point. What are some of the cases, like the Greenpoint case? What are some? You talked about one in Simi Valley. What's
Sure.
going on in Simi Valley? Can you talk about it?
Sure. Simi Valley, radiation exposure to people.
Okay.
We have numerous radiation, I should say this, can affect the unborn fetus,
Yes.
affect the eyes of the unborn fetus.
Mhm.
We have 13 children who are either blind in one eye or blind in both eyes
Wow.
that live in this very small area.
Yes.
You know, no question caused by the radiation.
After so many years
After
of
so many
trying these cases, okay, it still gets you upset when you hear about these things, right?
I can hardly wait to get there. You know what I mean?
Seriously.
Honestly. I mean, if somebody buy the gas, I'd do it for
Yeah.
nothing.
We don't Boy
Wait a
Scout,
minute,
by
wait a
the way.
minute. Careful.
Truly, it is.
I'm going to have, I'm doing a show later today with Gloria Molina, the Board of Supervisors.
Sure.
Okay, one of the supervisors there. And I saw a show with Huell Hauser,
Uh-huh.
and he was talking about the San Gabriel watershed over here, which
Right.
is polluted from, I don't know, JPL or whatever.
Right.
Are you guys involved with that at all?
We were involved in one segment of that.
Yeah.
We got our cases settled.
Yes.
But the problem is not resolved.
No, it's got this huge water, you know, the size of Lake Tahoe, you know, underneath the ground over there. That's all polluted, right?
No question. A bigger problem is the PG&E problem because that chromium that
Your
they,
favorite people.
my favorite people, the chromium they dumped is
Yeah.
now within 100 yards of the Colorado River as it migrates towards the river.
How can they physically stop this?
I
Or
don't-
are they trying? Are they doing it?
Yeah, they thought they would maybe put in a cement wall underground or something like that.
Was Robert McNamara involved with that? I'm just kidding.
No, that was
The
Donald.
reason-
That was Donald Rumsfeld. Yeah.
Good point. The reason I bring that up is because you remember in Vietnam, he wanted to build an electronic fence around Vietnam to keep the enemy out.
Right.
You know, so I was build a cement wall. How deep does it have to go?
Well, it'd have to go down. It's not going to work. I mean, this is a real problem.
Yes.
Because once the stuff is there, you really don't have control of it and where it goes after that.
Yeah.
And so all this dumping at the PG&E plant.
So
now,
this is going to affect a lot of people. So, like, your law firm is aware of this.
Sure.
PGE is aware of it. What is being done?
Well, they are having some hearings on it. We're not actually, we don't have a voice in this fight as it currently sits.
I'm going to ask you a personal question.
Sure.
Do you drink bottled water?
I absolutely drink
Really?
bottled water.
Are there
yeah.
anything else?
More
Is there-
importantly, Erica only drinks
Well,
it.
you actually have a clinical test going on right here because I only drink tap water. So that,
Oh, is that right? No, supposedly the water here in LA is supposed to be the best water in the country.
You know, I think so. As a matter of fact, I don't want to say something bad against LA Water because, in all honesty, it's gotten pretty good reviews, no question.
20 years ago, I think it was 20 years ago, Bayer aspirin had Tylenol that was laced with cyanide.
Right.
The CEO immediately, and he's considered the gold standard in this, what he did, he came out and he said he pulled out 31 million bottles of cyanide off the market. Why aren't more CEOs doing that? And don't tell me the bottom line.
You know what?
What happened to ethics?
What happened to ethics? Here you are, you've gotten to the top of this company.
Yes.
You got to the top because you were smart.
Yeah.
You knew how to make good decisions.
Yes.
And it seems to me that most people probably want to do the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
Once they get to the top, now you have a problem. And instead of coming forth, look at the way Chief Bratton came forth
Yes.
last week, 2 weeks ago,
Yes.
with respect to the officers that did the wrong thing. They did the wrong thing, we're going to blah, blah, blah. You know, right, no cover up, no nonsense.
Might add,
But
it
it also-
came forward before the mayor.
but it also has
Yeah.
has to do with the way the change in compensation for chief executives.
Yeah.
You know, one of the best examples of this is Merck. When Roy Vagelos was chairman of Merck, Merck was considered the most ethical company in the world, and as a matter of fact, they donated vaccine for river blindness to Africa. He made an international
So
reputation.
stock options, isn't it?
It's moving away from compensation. Too many people, whatever industry they're in, are just in the
Yes.
stock option business. Get the options, get them vested.
Let's talk
cash
about
out.
one last thing. The companies make a mistake, they're penalized, they pay money. You know, like PG&E. There was a decision made high up by an executive who caused these problems. Why aren't they prosecuted criminally?
You know, that's a good question.
I mean, you'd like to
suppose-
see that, wouldn't you?
I think so. And you know what?
Yeah.
A couple of those prosecutions would end it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's one thing, at the end of the day, here's the money, forget
Yes.
about it.
Yes. Because it's not
Money's-
their money anyway.
No, and money's easy.
Yeah.
If all of a sudden somebody was faced with 30 days, one of these chief executives, 30 days, you can share the cell with
A murderer.
Ms. Hilton. But if that was an option out there,
Yes.
believe me, there'd be a whole new ballgame.
And we've got a real-life test of that because, you know, in the area of copyright law, the executives of companies that violate certain copyrights are personally
stealing.
liable.
They're stealing.
And they're personally liable.
Are
and,
they?
And if you track under the copyright law, and if you track those number of infractions against infractions in other areas, you see the effect of creating the personal
Good.
liability.
That's what they should be personally responsible. I want to thank both of you for being on the show.
You know, I want to thank you, to be able to tell this story so that people understand a little bit what the trial lawyers do is really important.
Yeah, it's a tough job, and a lot of people don't realize that. They all think that, lawyers are money-grabbing, hungry people, but that's not the case. You brought up in the Aaron Brockovich case, you laid out $10 million out of your own money, and that is without paying your lawyers, right?
That's right.
That's just on experts, that's just on the mechanism of the trial. So I want everybody to understand that. You guys are great. We're going to have you back again. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Steve.
And two more partners of the great law firm Girardi and Keese are Paul Sizemore and Jim O'Callahan. How are you?
Good morning.
Thanks for coming here. You guys primarily specialize in pharmaceutical drug litigation, right?
That's exactly
And
right.
I understand you're handling a variety of cases which include Vioxx, correct?
Yes.
Bextra, right?
Yes.
Peanut butter? Am I correct there?
That's right.
Tell us a little bit about peanut butter. When I saw the list, I said, well, that's not a drug. What's going on?
We've got about just under 300 cases, Steve, and what this involves is one particular make of peanut butter has been indicated by
Which
this-
one was that, by
It
the
was
way?
Peter Pan.
Peter Pan.
The CDC has actually pointed out one particular factory in southern Georgia that was infected with a very rare, I call it bug, but infection, Salmonella tennessee.
Yes.
And it's a very damaging bug if you get it, and it can actually result in the loss of life.
Really?
Absolutely.
Have there been anybody that died as a result of eating peanut butter?
Absolutely. A very good friend of the firm, as a matter of fact, died.
Of your firm?
Absolutely.
Of your firm?
Absolutely. A very well-respected Midwestern
From eating
attorney.
a peanut butter and jelly sandwich?
We have the 2 cans, they're jars of peanut butter, and they've actually been tested and shown to contain this
Wow.
particular bug.
That is very much personal involvement, isn't it?
Absolutely.
What's the status of this case?
Just last Friday, there was a big hearing in front of the multi-district litigation panel.
Yes.
And they're trying to determine what particular judge is going to handle this nationwide litigation. It'll be focused in one particular site.
How many cases do you have here?
Just under 300.
So if anybody's watching this show and they've eaten peanut butter, what is the reaction? What's the negative reaction that they have gotten so that they might want to call you?
Well, we're only looking for the very, or the more injured spectrum of
Yes.
cases. A lot of people have eaten the peanut butter and maybe had one spoonful and had some gastrointestinal or stomach upset. But there are a lot of people out there that have experienced prolonged hospitalization, blindness,
Can the doctors
death.
nail it down to eating this?
Absolutely, they
can.
can. When they test you at the hospital, they'll actually run a scan and they'll find that it's salmonella. The
Yeah.
problem is that the CDC has actually pointed out that it's one particular rare type of salmonella. And the hospitals generally don't get that specific because why would they?
Right.
They know you've got salmonella, so let's treat it and
Yes.
go from there.
Now, without getting into the details, what is Peter Pan, the company, what's their position on this?
Well, we'll find out after the MDL is established. We're
Would it be
hopeful.
nice if someone stepped forward and said, I'm sorry? Wouldn't it?
There's a lot of talk about personal responsibility,
Yeah.
but so few companies are willing to step up to the plate when it happens.
And that's one of the things that I want to get into with talking with you. You hear a lot about pharmaceutical drugs out there that are, that have problems. I mean, every time you buy one of these things or see it advertised in a magazine or newspaper, there is another page on the back that has print that is so small, it takes a magnifying glass to read it, and it has all the warnings, but people don't understand that. Are there any safe pharmaceutical drugs out there?
Well, I think that the drugs that have been around for a long time, long enough that they're in a generic form, are probably the safest drugs because they have tremendous history behind them, and we know that they're safe.
In talking about we brought up some of the cases, Resolin. Tell us what that drug is. Tell us what are the health effects of taking that drug. What are some of the negative health effects?
Well, I think the Resolin litigation, which is pretty much wrapped up at this point, but it's an example of the failings of the FDA with respect to monitoring drugs and the need that consumers have to have lawyers who are willing to undertake lawsuits
Yes.
when they're injured as a result of drugs. And Resolin was a drug given for type 2 or adult onset diabetes, which resulted in liver damage and in some cases liver damage leading to death.
Wow. What about the Vioxx cases? There's a whole lot of them. There's, 23,000 of them nationwide, I heard, I read someplace.
Double it.
You guys are the lead counsel, your law firm, Girardi and Keese, lead counsel in California, right?
We're lead counsel in California. Paul is very involved with the MDL Vioxx litigation as well as the Bextra and Celebrex litigation. Paul is involved in one of the first trials of Vioxx in the MDL,
Yes.
and is very involved in the COX-2 litigation
Yes.
nationally. Here in California, our firm serves as liaison counsel for all of the plaintiffs' lawyers who have cases filed in California State Court
Right.
against Merck.
Let's talk about the FDA and the role that they play in protecting the consumer. The role is questionable, isn't it?
Well, it would be better if there was a stronger
honestly,
role. Yeah, if there was a stronger role.
Yeah.
Steve, most people don't understand that the FDA doesn't test drugs.
Yes.
What it does is, well, let's take the Vioxx example.
Yes.
There were about 500 crates of documents brought in containing 500,000 documents that were given to the FDA.
Initially.
Initially.
Before it was approved.
Before it was approved.
Okay.
Now the FDA, they didn't take the substance Vioxx and test it on individuals or animals to see if it was safe. They just looked at those documents that were provided by the company.
Could they come back and say, we don't have the staff, we don't have the money, we don't have the facility to be independent testers?
Well, there's I don't want to say CYA, Steve, but
Yeah.
this is a bureaucracy here, and you've got to think that there's some personal responsibility.
Sure.
The individual that looked at all these documents and then said this drug is safe to give to 20 million Americans, they bear some responsibility, and it would take a special individual indeed to come forward and say, perhaps I dropped the ball.
I'd also like to point out, though, that there was material that Merck had, information that Merck had, questions that Merck had themselves about the safety of Vioxx.
Yes.
And that information wasn't provided to the FDA by Merck. And I don't think it's fair to entirely blame the FDA. I think Merck bears the overwhelming responsibility because they were keenly aware of the dangers the drug could
This
pose.
brings on another point I discussed with Tom and Howard, which is you're talking about the personal responsibility of the corporate officers. I think Tom and Howard both agreed that if you saw some of these executives who ended up doing jail time, because they are essentially responsible for the death of people, aren't they? If they're aware of this information, they're not revealing it. Now my question to you is, how can we change our society so that these people are personally responsible? How do we do that?
I think we've seen a good first step here with the OxyContin litigation. We've seen a lot of the actual executives responsible for the deaths and the folks getting addicted to this drug have been indicted. In the Vioxx realm, we've actually seen the Department of Justice, the SEC conduct investigations, and we're hopeful that we'll see the type of actual responsibility from these executives that we've seen in the brokerage industry and the accounting industry, et cetera. It should be no different.
Are there attorney generals of certain states that are moving this forward?
There are, and the attorney generals are doing it both on a civil and a criminal basis.
E. coli, you see a lot of problems with, fast food restaurants. We're not going to name any names here, but, you're involved with some of these cases, aren't you, too?
We sure are.
What type of cases are you involved?
Well, actually, one of the more interesting cases that we have is a case that involves a grower who was wrongfully accused
And you're
by the parent.
representing him.
And we're representing him. He was wrongfully accused by Taco Bell and its parent company that somehow he was responsible for providing tainted food, and it wasn't true. And it's a wonderful family-owned farm company that's been in business for decades.
I love that about your firm, because you look for the truth.
Absolutely.
And you represent the people. People would think, well, it's easy to sue this lettuce grower, okay, or this onion provider or whatever, okay, but you're actually representing him because you know the truth.
And that's the truth isn't our guide, then our work means nothing.
Yeah. Well, you've done a great job. Continue the great work that you're doing. We're going to have you back on the show again. It's been a pleasure having both of you on here. And just so we can reiterate, where we can get more information about your website, it is
www.girardikeese.com.
and your telephone number where you can call both of you is
213-977-0211.
Great. Thank you for being on the show. We're going to have you back again. Thanks for watching our show. We'll be back next week, and you can watch more of our shows at www.insiderexclusive.com. Thanks again.